Hey guys, Amanda here, Masters in Marriage and Family Therapy. Today is part 2 of our 20 advices from a man named Gerald Rogers. He was married for 16 years and then he got a divorce. And these 20 advices he scribbled on Facebook and it went viral. These are the things he wished he would have known that could have prevented his divorce. And so we're going to learn from his advice. I did a part 1 from going over advices 1 through 10. So if you missed that, press pause on this video and go check that one out and then come back and watch part 2. We're going to go from 11 through 20. And so here's the first one. Number 11, be present. Now, a few years ago, family experts, they were preaching that what's more important is quality time over quantity time. However, recent research shows that really you need both, that kids need both, that quality time is just as important as quantity time. And my suggestion, my appeal is that your spouse also needs both. It's almost like an unbroken circle that when quality time happens in the midst of quantity time, you can't have quality experiences with someone that you're not spending quantity time with. So let me give you an example of something that just happened yesterday. Today's Monday, so yesterday was Sunday. We spent all day with our boys, River and Reed. And, trying to find different things to entertain them. They are high energy. And so we took them outside and we were having a little picnic there. We were playing with the dogs. And River and Reed, they have just recently ridden a little pony. And so their new thing is to just mount on anything that they find. They raise one hand up. They're real cowboys. And they just, shout, woohoo, woohoo, with their hand up. And now Reed, he's more of our daredevil. And so he starts to mount on Jack. So we have two border collies, Q and Jax. And Jax is the one who allows more of the abuse to take place. And so Reed is mounting on him. And I just nudged Renee and I said, Renee, this is going to be epic. Take out your camera. We're the worst parents. And here we are, right, with our cameras, just getting ready to film what will be the most epic video ever. And I want to save this video to just, show him as he grows up. And I said, man, Jax is going to, find something, a squirrel, a bunny, something that he's going to want to run after. And Reed is just, he's going to fall on his butt. And so, sure enough, Reed is looking at us, both hands in the air, just like, woohoo, woohoo. He can't speak, but if he could, he'd be saying like, Mom, look at me, right? No hands. And as he's like excited and he's smiling, all of a sudden, Jax just looks into, I don't even know what it was that he saw, but he just beelines. He gets right out from under Reed's, legs, and Reed falls on his butt, and he stands up, he brushes himself off, and he's looking at us like, what just happened? And so these are the quality moments that you experience when you have quantity time together, right? It took a while before he actually got adjusted and to find a good position. All those take time. And so the same is the case with your spouse. I can't have these amazing conversations or these amazing moments of connection and intimacy with Renee if I'm speaking to him for 5 minutes and we're just exchanging, hey, what did you do today? Did you pick this up at the grocery stores? Or River and Reed took a nap, or they did. No, that's not going to happen. So we need to make sure that we are spending time together, because in the time together, we are going to experience these little magical moments of connection. Now, I found different ways to try to make us be present with one another, right? This is the advice that he says, be present with each other. And so here's 3 ways that has worked for us. Now, when I tell people to schedule time with one another, say, oh, Amanda, come on, where's the spontaneity? And we need to keep things fresh. Listen, I get that, and I'm all for that. However, we need to be realistic with the busyness that is life. And I like to write things down. I am very old school. I like paper and pen. I have a planner, and on my planner, I write down all of my clients for that day, or my appointments, dentist, whatever. And so things that are important to me, I schedule. and I show up, and when I show up, I am fully present. So why can't it be the case with someone that I love? And so you better believe that in my planner, I have it there that Renee comes home and we're together as a family, my phone is off. And when the boys go to sleep and now I'm having one-on-one with Renee, I don't care who you are. If you call me, I ain't answering because I am being present. I have blocked off that time to be with my husband. So if it's important, you are going to schedule it. Now, the other thing that is important is that while you are together with each other, and I've done a video which we talked a lot about this sort of tech, world that we live in, and we're constantly distracted. I mean, everyone these days has ADD, right? We're constantly distracted. We can't seem to focus. Our minds are a million miles a minute, and it doesn't help that we have a device on our phone that's constantly alerting, clicking, buzzing, and taking our attention away. And so when you have scheduled this time for your spouse, for your wife, or for your husband, make sure it's tech-free so that you can have undivided attention. So the TV is off, your phone is put away, the computer is put away, because you will get distracted. Not only that, but make sure you're having eye contact. How many times you have conversations with people and then they look up, and then they look back down at their phone? You must have eye contact. There's a man, his name is Tolly. I can't remember his first name, but he says that the moment that you realize that you are not present, you are already present again. And so make sure if you get distracted, you're like, oh man, I wasn't present. Well, you just again got present. So in the beginning, it's going to take time to sort of relearn or retrain ourselves because we are a society that is constantly getting bombarded and distracted. Now, so okay, you've scheduled time together, you're there, undivided attention, tech-free, you're making eye contact, but you still realize that you are constantly getting sidetracked, or your mind is going off, or you're thinking about all your to-do list. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, and I'm going to say this, and Renee's just going to be like, oh, he's going to roll his eyes, because I say it a lot. But here's the thing. Renee is quite smarter than I am, especially in the area that it comes to math. He just tells me these things, and his brain just works in a way that mine does not. And so the math stuff just goes right over my head. And he's an engineer. He works with planes, and so I always ask him, hey, how was your day, or this and that, and what was the most exciting part about your day? And when he starts to tell me these things, I'm just like, I don't know if I'm just getting so overwhelmed by information that I know nothing about, but I tend to just literally zone out sometimes, and I have to catch myself and try to get back in the conversation. And so I have found that the best way for me to stay present is to get engaged in the conversation. And so I start to ask a bunch of questions and say, hey, I didn't understand this, or hey, I didn't get this, or show me. I'm a visual learner. And so he's messing around with the UTV that's not working these days, and he's excited about that and wants to tell me all about it. But sometimes he literally says, here, let me show you. So he walks me out there and he says, this is what I'm talking about, and this is the screw that I'm using because of this. I still don't understand about 50% of what he's saying, but because I'm getting engaged, it makes it easier to stay present, to stay connected. So stay curious when you are having these conversations. And now a client said that this is something that's worked for her in her conversations with her husband that also talks about stuff that is beyond her mind. She says, Amanda, sometimes I just find myself repeating what he's saying because it helps me stay present. Now, whatever works for you, you do that. Because here's the reality. We think, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna manage my time. I'm gonna manage my time. Well, John Maxwell, he says that time management is an oxymoron. He says it's an oxymoron because, time is beyond our ability to control. However, he says, priority management is the answer to maximizing the time that we have. And so being present is all about capitalizing on these quality moments to make it the best moments ever. But again, we need to be spending enough time together to create space for these magical moments together. So be present, create quality and quantity moments, and try to incorporate these things. Schedule it in. Undivided attention, tech-free, and get engaged with tons of questions. And if need be, start repeating the whole conversation. All right, number 12, love strong. Love strong. Now, I'm going to put my spin on love strong. I don't know that this is exactly what he meant, but when I heard the word love strong and in conversation with God, said, God, what does it mean to you to love strong? Now, there's a website I really like called Desiring God, and in it there's a man named David Mathis that he talked about gentleness being what the Bible sees as strong. And there's a quote, I wrote it there so I could tell you verbatim. It says this: gentleness is often used as a positive spin on weakness. But gentleness in the Bible is emphatically not a lack of strength, but the godly exercise of power. Oh, I love that. So I thought to love strong is really to love good and gentle. And this is to love like Jesus. When I think of Jesus, I don't think of weakness. I think of a man who loved us so strong because he loved good and he loved gentle. You see, Jesus said of himself, I am gentle and lowly of heart. Now, it seems that our world sees strong completely different than the way God defines strong. You see, what we have, unfortunately, is a bunch of insecure men that flex and threaten. But the men who are secure in the Lord are secure in their strength. They truly know what it means to love strong. Let's take Moses as an example. Now, Moses knew that he was called by God to fulfill a very important mission. But you see, Moses, like most of us, thought that he was going to do it by the strength of his biceps. And so Moses was one of those guys who would flex his biceps every chance he got. How do I know? Well, it says that one day Moses was walking around Egypt and he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. And so he quickly goes there, kills the Egyptian, and buries him under the sand. First, flexed bicep. Now, the next day he goes out and he sees two Hebrews going at it. And he goes there, hey, you guys are brothers. Why are you guys fighting? And he splits them up. And one Hebrew looks at him and says, who made you the judge over us? Are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian? Moses didn't think anyone saw that he killed and then hid the body. But a lot of people had seen. And so Moses, again, flexes his bicep. Now he's on the run. He is a fugitive because Pharaoh is not pleased and he's out to get him. He runs away. So now this is 2 times that he flexed his bicep. He's about to flex it again. There's women at the well there. Midianites are there with their camels and they're harassing the women, and Moses shoos them all away, right? Because he's a manly man. He's a tough guy. But sure enough, every time that Moses was flexing his biceps, he was not capable of fulfilling the mission that God had set out to him. Now, I'm going to press pause here and keep you wondering, but something amazing happens in Moses' life, and it was only after this period of time that he was able to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. He learned what it truly meant to love strong. But first, let's see another part of what it means to love strong. So to love strong means to love good and gentle, but it also means to have a spirit of service. Now, David in the Bible, in Psalms 78:70, I'm gonna read that, what it says there to you. So go to Psalms. Let me smack down like in the middle there. Psalms 78:70 says this. He also chose David, his, hear this word, servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. So he describes David here, this Psalms describes David as a servant. But why didn't he describe David as and he took King David. He took Prophet David. He took the poet David. He took the warrior David, right? David was so many different things. He had so many different titles. But here in the Psalms, they chose to use the description of David the servant. Now, when David was called to be king, if you can recall the story, he was a shepherd. It's not like he didn't have a job, okay? He was tending to the sheep. And his job was so insignificant that when the prophet went there to choose the next king, Jesse, David's father, allowed him to check out, to see all of his sons. And they were big, and they were warriors, and they were tough. And one by one, the sons of Jesse is going past the prophet, and God is whispering in his ear, nope, not that one, nope, not that one, not that one. Jesse didn't even think about David, right, who was over there playing his harp and tending to the sheep. It was so insignificant, his job, that he thought, it surely won't be David that's going to be chosen as king. Well, the Bible says that God is a reader of the hearts, and you better believe that David, the shepherd boy, was the one who was chosen to be the next king. Now, if you believe that David was called because he was a shepherd without titles, because he was young and inexperienced, you are wrong. You see, none of these things, how can I say this? None of these virtues is what made God call David. God didn't call David because he wasn't qualified or less qualified. God calls David for one reason, because David had the heart of a servant, because David understood what it meant to love strong. David was the kind of man that would allow himself to be fully emptied of self so that God could rule through him in true strength. Now let's go back to Moses. You see, when I think of Moses and when I think of David, I think of two men who were called by God after they were shepherds. Moses was once again finally able to fulfill the destiny that God had for him after he spent 40 years in the desert taking care of sheep. Now, in the beginning of Moses' life, when God called him, he says, yeah, I'm your guy, look at my biceps, look at me flex. But it wasn't until 40 years in the desert that when God again comes to Moses and Moses says, oh, no. I'm not your guy. There's no way I'm your guy. After spending time with sheep, Moses understood what it means to be meek and humble, so much so that in the end of Moses' life, he was said by the Bible to be the meekest man in all the world. Could it be that taking care of sheep made Moses and David so humble and so meek? And that this is why God almost allowed them to be shepherds of sheep so that they could truly be the leaders that they were. So men, now I know I said that I was speaking to both women and men because this advice, although Rogers wrote it specifically to men, I think it can be applied to both. But when I think of love strong, I'm speaking to you men because as leaders of your household, you need to lead like Jesus, or else there is no woman who is going to submit to that kind of leadership. But if you love strong, and by strong I mean if you love her with gentleness, and if you love her with the spirit of service, there is no woman that will not submit to your leadership. So men, love strong. Now the next one, 13. This one's funny. Don't be an idiot. That's literally what the advice he gives. Don't be an idiot. Now this is my spin to it. There's a Proverbs that I like that it says this. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. Now pay close attention. We all make mistakes. All of us do. I do, you do, and guess what? Newsflash, you're going to continue to make certain mistakes. But here's the thing. People say this all the time, learn from your mistakes, learn from your mistakes. The reality is that learning from our mistakes does not naturally happen. It's not an automatic thing, which is why the proverb says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his folly, meaning that he clearly didn't learn. The fool, the idiot, does not learn. But you and I, if we could be real, man, I've lost count at how many times I've been an idiot. But when we are intentional about learning from our mistakes, this is where the magic happens. There's a quote I like from John Dewey. He says this: the person who really thinks, who really sets his mind to think, learns quite as much from his failures as he does from his successes. But we need to think, we need to reflect, and there's an AAA acronym that I've come up with to facilitate you in not being an idiot. So the first one is acknowledge. The second one, ask, and the third one, act. So acknowledge, ask, and act. Now let's break that down. The first one, acknowledge. Own up quickly to your mistakes. Do not hesitate. Do not put I'm sorry, but do not excuse it. Take full ownership, full responsibility, and own it quickly. Do not let time go by, because pride will be build up, hubris, arrogance will build up, and you might not own it up. And so own up quickly. Now, the next one is ask. Ask yourself a series of questions, sort of like, what went wrong? Why did I do this and not this? What could I have done differently? What can I learn from this failure? Spend time reflecting. Don't just own up and then own up, I'm sorry, and then go on about your day. No, because then you're going to return to your vomit. But you need to sit there and you need to reflect and start asking yourself tough questions. Be ruthless with yourself and start mapping it out. Write it down, journal it down. And some of these questions you might not even be able to answer. So call in the troops. Ask your wife. Ask your husband. Hey, why is this a pattern that I keep having? Maybe sit down with a therapist. Sit down with a Christian therapist and figure out the reasons why you're doing the things that you're doing. Remember, insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. So don't just own up quickly, but then figure out why this happened so that you are now an expert and no longer will you repeat the same mistake. And finally, here comes the next part. Act. There are different ways that people like to do this. Whenever I walk people through this, don't be an idiot, AAA, acknowledge, ask, and act. People are so creative. They come up with some of the best ideas. Now, one of the things that I suggest when you do a mistake or keep doing something that you don't want to do is make a list of all of the reasons why you don't want to do that. And so for one of my clients who was completely addicted to pornography, and it was just ruining his life. It was ruining his relationships. He couldn't go to work. I mean, just a series of things that was happening due to this pornography addiction. So he got this index card and he wrote down a series of things as to why he didn't want to participate anymore. And he would write there, it's ruining my relationship with my wife. He honestly wrote, I can't get my little friend up because I'm so used to these images and me self-masturbating. I can't be sexual with my wife. And he just wrote a series of things as to why he didn't want to partake in that anymore. And then on the back of the index card, I told him to write his favorite Bible verses. And so he wrote Bible verses like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And for every reason why he didn't want to, partake in pornography, there was a Bible verse that would encourage him. And he says, Amanda, this was unbelievable, because every time he would get the urge, he would quickly whip out his index card and he would just sit there. And I said, listen, you sit there prayerfully and you read through all of these things and you read the Bible verse and you pray and you read the reason why you shouldn't and you pray. And sure enough, by the grace of God, he was able to have victory over this. He was no longer the dog returning to his vomit. He wasn't the fool repeating his folly. And then the other thing, make it hard. Make it really, really difficult. One guy who was who was cheating on his wife, was having an affair, changed his number. For the time being, got off of social media where he knew that the woman could contact him. So make it hard for you to engage in the behavior that you do not want to engage in. I was reading, as I was getting ready to do this video, I was reading through different things that people would do to make it hard. And one therapist said that her client who was addicted to shopping, that she actually, I mean, this is crazy, but hey, if it works, she would actually get her credit cards and she would put them in water. She would freeze it. So her credit card would literally be surrounded by ice. And that whenever she wanted to go and purchase something, she would literally have to sit there and thaw this ice so that she could get to the credit card. But as she was sitting there, waiting for this, she's like, oh, you know what? I don't think I really want it that bad. So that's what it's all about, having this pause in between the thought and the action to sort of regroup yourself and think, hey, I don't want to be an idiot right now. All right? So number 14, what's the next one? Give her space. Give him space. Now, self-care is very important, and it is often overlooked. And if you overlook it enough, sometimes you're going to be forced into it. Like my workaholic husband, who because he, got injured from just over abuse and burnt out, he was forced into take 10 days off. Not because he wanted to, but because he was forced into it. Now, women, they're awesome at taking care of everyone and everything else but themselves. And so sometimes you're going to have to help your wife create the space for her to just rest. So giving her space means whether it's her go read a book or her go to the beach or her go to the spa, I don't know. Check it out with her, see what floats her boat, and then create a space for her to do it, because most likely she won't want to do it. She's going to come up with all the excuses as to why she can, and that her presence in the home is important, that you're going to catch the house on fire. Whatever the reason may be, you need to create this space for her to go do this. And I'm going to add, if you have kids, your wife needs space, because at this point now I'm concerned about her mental health. Spending enough time with River and Reed, sometimes Renee comes home and I'm like, listen, I need a break. They've driven me nuts. They're cute and all, but I do not want to see River and Reed right now. And Renee, people joke around that I am the accelerator and he's my brakes, because I am go, 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 go. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. I'll forget to eat. I'll just, run myself to the ground. And oftentimes Renee will look at my schedule and he'll be like, no. He'll be like, listen, what can we take away? Where can we minimize so that you can have time for yourself? And so find that in your spouse. Create a space so that you can, engage in conversation and say, hey, is this really something that you want to do? Where can we shave off time? Where can I give you space? Do you need to go out to take a break? Do you want to read? Whatever it is, do you want to, have an hour to work out? Whatever it is that your wife feels that will be her moment of self-care, provide that for her. Clear out that space, because most women will find a really hard time thinking about self. And then I'll say the same is true for men. There are certain times when Renee spends with River and Reed. A few weekends ago, I said, hey, you're going to ride solo here and you're going to spend a few hours with the boys. I had to do some errands. I had just a bunch of things to do. And when I came back, Renee just looked like he had spent a week by himself. He was just right? He was shell-shocked. He's like, oh, this was incredibly hard. He's like, I don't know how you do it. And he's like, I need to go cut the grass, right? And so, find a creative way to give each other the space you need. All right, 15, halfway there. Be transparent. Be transparent. This is so incredibly important. I had a client who said, listen, Amanda, I am just so used to lying. Growing up, I would constantly lie. And I never told the truth, and so I have such an incredible time, such a difficult time telling the truth. He goes, and I even lie about silly things, stupid things, that sometimes I'll lie, and then I'll be like, why did I even lie about that? It wasn't even necessary to lie about that. And so if this is the case, being transparent is going to be hard. But again, you have to train yourself to do the right thing. Now, I get it. The truth can be hard to say. And a lot of times we try to cover up the truth to try to minimize the pain. But let me tell you something. The Bible makes it clear that the truth will set you free. And so the opposite of true, not telling the truth, will enslave you. It will make you a prisoner. You will not be able to live with yourself. You may for a few weeks, months, years, but sooner or later it will catch up to you because it will destroy your soul. And being transparent, closing the door is not enough. You need to lock the door. You need to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I love a quote from a woman named Ellen White, and she says, "No deviation from strict integrity is pleasing to God." And so to use the word transparent, no deviation from strict transparency is pleasing to God. Now, what I see a lot is in the process of cheating taking place, but when I use the word cheating, I want you to think about it in a fuller sort of idea here. I want you to think about it in terms of betrayal. Dr. John Gottman, he talks about betrayal, and you immediately think, oh, cheating. No. And we've created a video specifically on that because everyone betrays their spouse in small, medium, and large ways. Betraying your spouse like these little white lies, like the lies that you tell to try to minimize pain, well, that is a form of betrayal when you side and go and talk poorly about your spouse and family members. So this is the type of betrayal that I'm talking about. Now, when you don't tell the full truth, it's quite hard for a wound to begin to heal when it's still very vulnerable to injury. Now, if I'm trying to heal a wound, but I forget to take maybe some of the, how can I explain this? Imagine that I have an open wound it's fully infected. It's only going to begin to properly heal if I first clean it out, if I put water in it, if I, put alcohol in it, if I stitch it up. But if I'm constantly trying to stitch up a wound that has not been cleaned out, it's not going to get any better. Because as the time progresses, it's almost going to be more painful than had I just dealt with it in that moment. Well, the same is the truth when you're not being fully transparent. And a website I really like called The Fair Recovery, one of the women they're talking about when she cheated on her, now this is a cheating that actually took place, she cheated on her husband, and she would give him these half-truths. And first she would be like, oh no, it wasn't a physical affair, it was an emotional affair, even though it was a physical affair. And she said something that I really connected with, and I thought, wow, that's so interesting, and this seems to be the case also with my clients. She says that she was measuring out the truth for betrayed spouses is the most hurtful thing that the unfaithful spouse can do. You're right, you're just throwing a little bit of truth, you're just measuring it out. And she says, this is not helpful to your situation. And if you desire to grow trust, and if you desire to rebuild trust that was broken, so that you can connect with your spouse, so that intimacy can once again reign true in your marriage, you must be transparent. Now, radical transparency, research was done about how relationships that have radical transparency, they thrive. And they thrive because radical transparency is a conduit for sustaining intimacy and connection. And that's what we want in our relationships, right? That's what we want in our marriages. In radical transparency, there's two parts. The first part is being fully open and revealing yourself, all of yourself. And the second part is allowing your spouse to reveal all of themselves and being open and honest and receptive to what is your spouse's, your partner's reality. And so openly encouraging one another to be transparent, and then being courageous enough to be transparent yourself. And the research doesn't lie. Research shows that people who are truthful about themselves experience more relationship intimacy and well-being over and over and over again. Different researchers doing different researches showing the same thing. Being transparent brings and reaps good in your marriage. Now, the next one, it's almost like somebody says, it's the same thing. Well, it's similar, but we're going to look at it in a different way with different examples. Number 16, be vulnerable. Now, I'm going to read a Brené Brown quote because, of course, if we're talking about vulnerability, we gotta quote Brené Brown. And she says this: vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having, hear this word, the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage. Vulnerability is our greatest measure of courage. So be vulnerable. You know why? Because vulnerability, it's a double-edged sword. Those who protect themselves to avoid getting hurt, to avoid, getting to the outcome that they do not want, well, guess what? They also fail to connect intimately with their spouse. They fail to take off the mask and showing their true self, and they're all the while thinking, if they knew this about me, would they still stay? If they knew that about me, would they still stick around? But when you are vulnerable, when you show your true self, and you put it all there on the table, oh man, you can connect soul to soul, heart to heart, mind to mind, knowing that even though there's a song that I like that says this, Lord, you see the depths of my heart, yet you love me the same. And that's the kind of love that you experience when you are willing to be vulnerable. Share your fears, share your feelings, because the most growth that I have seen during couple sessions have happened when they are willing to be vulnerable. Those conversations that they thought, oh my goodness, this surely will end my relationships. Well, those were the conversations that just catapulted them into what I call just the holy ground of intimacy in their marriage. Here's the next one, number 17. Never stop growing together. The Bible has a verse that I love, and it says this: a people with no vision perish. And the same is true with a couple with no vision. If you do not have a vision, if you do not have goals and aspirations and dreams, if you do not have a common purpose together, well, you're not going to go anywhere, because a people with no vision, as a couple with no vision, they will perish. So find something to work on together and get her done. Now, an exercise that Renee and I did once, we did sort of a couple's day of activities and learning about each other. We love to do these things at least once a year, or find something to do. And the person running it there, it was like a love coach, whatever kind of deal. And the person running it, she's like, I want you to, she gave us a huge, white paper, cardboard paper. And she goes, I want you to just draw your vision, draw your dreams. And I mean, this was a few years ago. I can't even remember how long ago this was, a few years ago. And sure enough, Renee, we were dreaming together, and we were planning it together. And I said, oh, Renee, I would love to live in a ranch. I would love to have chickens and horses and just animals. And I want twin boys. That was always such a dream of mine. And I put like that I wanted dogs, and I put all these little things, and I wanted fruit trees, and Renee put all his dreams and his goals and the different things that we wanted to do at the nonprofit. And I kid you not, we've been able to accomplish so many of these goals and these visions because we had a map, and then we worked toward it. And it's amazing to sort of hold up that white cardboard paper and say, hey, like, we live on a ranch now, and look, there's the banana tree that we drew here. So dream together, write it down on paper, and then get her done. Do everything you can to make these dreams a reality. Never stop growing. Now, what happens when water is stagnant, when water stagnation occurs, is when the water stops flowing, right? And when water stops flowing, well, it just creates a cesspool of just major environmental concerns. It is not a good place to get in. You stick your finger in a water that has not flowed for a very long time and your finger will fall off. Well, the complete opposite is true with a living lake. Now, a living lake is a body of water with two different sources coming in. You have your inlet and your outlet. So your inlet is snow melting that's coming in, and your outlet is it going out, the lake water growing out. In your marriage, growth is very much like that. It's a giving and receiving. The same way water needs to have an outlet and an inlet, your marriage needs to do that so that it is the perfect place for growth. And this is your visions, your planning, your goals, you feeding into your spouse feeding into you. Never stop growing together. This ongoing exchange of you pouring into your spouse and your spouse pouring into you. Create spaces and places and visions and dreams to foster growth that takes place together. As couples start getting older, and it's something that really saddens me, and something I think I'm so fearful of this that I'm constantly telling Renee, hey, this cannot be us. As soon as the kids get out of the house, the couples all of a sudden think, well, we have no kid, we just have nothing else to live for. Yes, you do. You know, and it's amazing to see as kids leave the house that just the couples are just like, oh, now what? Now what? You get your white cardboard paper and you sit down together and you start thinking of things that you want to do together, because never stop growing together. Find something else. Here's the next one. 18. This is a difficult one. Don't worry about money. The number one reason for divorces is stress over money. And here, Rogers is saying, don't worry about money. Now, I think that the best way that we can help with not worrying about money, I just can't say, hey, don't worry about money, now let's move on. There's a woman, her name is Crystal Payne, something like that, and she wrote a book called Money Making Mom. And in this book, she wrote a few ways to overcome the money stress. So if you have your paper, you have your pen, I hope you do, and you're writing all this stuff down, make sure you write this down. I'm just going to give you 3 ways. We're going to make a video and we're going to go into more detail about finances and money and the stress and the divorce rates around all this stuff. But I just want you to right now have 3 ways to already start managing the stress over money. So number 1, you have to be on the same team. There is no such thing as a me versus you. So when I say like, oh, Renee, this is my money, or Renee says, no, this is your money, my money. Okay, there is no such thing. When you're married, it is our money. What are we going to do with our money? What are we going to do with our finances? What are we going to do with our income? You are on the same team. And what happens is when you're not on the same team, there's a constant pointing of fingers. There's a woman who recently, her husband was there trying to get a new job and trying to provide, and she was getting stressed out over money because remember, they're on opposite teams. He's trying to get a job and she doesn't understand why he's not bringing the money in. And she goes, you're such a failure. Your one job is to provide. Do you think that made them get more money? Absolutely not. Their marriage is in shambles right now. Work together. Motivate each other, because guess what? If your spouse is doing well, you benefit. And vice versa. You are on the same team. You're trying to make goals. You're trying to kick soccer balls into the opposing goals, not at each other. So be on the same team, stop the finger pointing, take on this mission together and say, how can we do our finances differently? Where do we want to use our money? And here comes number 2. Set financial goals together. A people with no vision perish, right? You have to set goals, but they can't be some obscure goals like, for example, I want to save money. Okay, everyone wants to save money. You need to have a game plan here. So let's imagine that you want to save $500 in 2 months, right? That's a goal. I want to save $500 in 2 months. And so that would mean that let's say 4 weeks in each month, $500 divided by 8 weeks, because there's 4 weeks in a month, 2 months. That would be $62 that you have to set aside per week. And you can even lower that. That means that per day, I don't know, it's like 15 or 17 bucks, I think. I don't know if my math is wrong. You double check. But the point is, now you have more bite size. Now all of a sudden, the I want to save money is like, oh, how I want to save $500 in 2 months because I want to, whatever you want to do with that money, it becomes more manageable. It becomes more bite size. It's not as overwhelming and stressful. So set financial goals and break them down into manageable charts and plans. Now, when you're making your goals, start asking yourself questions like, what are my hopes? What are my dreams? Some couples, it's to save money for their kids' college fund. Another one, it's to do a family trip. Whatever that goal may be, set it together. But then also ask each other, hey, what are your individual goals? And go back and forth for that. One of Renee, we have different, and I'm going to give it to you in the next one, which is number 3, create a budget. So, okay, we have be on the same team, set financial goals, and create a budget. Now, there are different applications that you can use. Renee is very gung-ho about Dave Ramsey, and we use an app called Every Dollar. Okay? So in this app called Every Dollar, it is just, we know where every dollar goes, right? Every dollar. So he puts his income, I put my income, and then we start breaking it down into categories. So let's say groceries, and then we have, I don't know, what's another one, Renee? We have restaurants, we have miscellaneous, we have all these categories that together we set up, and then we put specific amounts in these categories, and then we have to stay within budget. And if we have a trip coming up, or, in the beginning of the year, we said, okay, we want to do a trip in April, and then there's something here. And so we mapped it all out. And then it's like a little game of ours. So whenever I do groceries, for example, I say, oh, okay, I have to stay within this limit here, and I have this much for the month. And it's so easy. And then every time I purchase something, I insert it there right in that app. And it takes away the stress. Why? Because I know exactly where my money is going. So I'm not going to worry about money. Why? Because Renee and I are on the same team. And I know that he's doing everything he can, and I'm doing everything I can. So we don't need to worry about money. You know why? Because we have our financial goals. And then you know why? Because we've created a budget and we have an app, and the numbers don't lie. Now, I love this book. I've talked about it before, Atomic Habits. And in this book, James Clear, he writes this. I'm going to read it verbatim. I wrote it there on my whiteboard so I don't forget. It says this: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your system. Every dollar is a system that is implemented. And so it is right there. So I don't have to wake up and be super motivated, to reach my goal. No, I'm going to fall to the level of my systems. So I need to have a strong foundation, a game plan here. And I think, these 3 ideas that Crystal Payne gave in her book is going to be your starting point. Now, 2 more to go. The next one, 19, forgive immediately. Forgive immediately. I love a quote from C.S. Lewis, and he says this: to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. That's it. Now, that's a tough one. Okay? Now, this is not to say that forgiveness is cheap, because forgiveness is not cheap. This is not to say that forgiveness won't have a process, but forgiveness is a principle that is lived out by those who understand what C.S. Lewis just says. Hey, God offers me forgiveness and grace, and I'm a mess. So I am so filled and rich with forgiveness from God that I can give it to others. Now, this is not because they deserve it or don't deserve it. We don't know. We're not the reader of hearts. And you can forgive even if someone hasn't even apologized. Because as you commit to the principle of forgiveness, and then slowly you work towards that process, and you work like a wife who says, Amanda, I'm still hurt and I'm still suffering, but I forgive my husband, and I am going to live every single day like I have forgiven him. That's what it's all about. There's a a parable that Jesus tells. It's in Matthew 18. Let me see here. Matthew 18. And I think this exemplifies it perfectly. Matthew 18 verses like 21, I think. I'm gonna read it quickly, okay? It says this. Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Right? Peter thinking like, hey, I'm going to be generous here. If you mess up to 7 times, I'll forgive you. And Jesus says to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Then he says, therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle his accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded that he be sold with his wife, children, and all that he had, and that payments be made. That was what they did back then. You don't have the money? Don't worry. You're going to be sold. 26, verse 26. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt. But now, listen to what happens. But that servant, right, the one who was just forgiven, went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, pay me what you owe. So his fellow servant does what he just did, fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, have patience with me and I will pay you all. And he would not. But he went and threw him into prison till he should pay his debt. So when his fellow servants saw that he had done this, they were grieved and came and told the master all that had happened. Then the master, right, the one who had forgiven him, called him and said, you wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you begged me. Should you not have also had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I have pitied you? In this parable, the king here is Jesus, who forgives us all of our debt. When the servant says, have patience with me and I will pay you all, his debt was so ridiculous, like he would never be able to pay. If he worked every single day for 24 hours, he would never be able to pay this debt. It was so ridiculous for him to even ask for mercy. Me and you, when we say, God, give us time and, we'll somehow appease, we're never gonna, no works will be enough to pay for the forgiveness of Christ on the cross on our behalf. Now, this other guy who owed him money, it wasn't even that much. But here he was, begging and, holding him by the neck here like a homeless for pennies when he was rich in forgiveness that he had just received from the king. And that's what you and I do. And now, look at what Jesus says, and I just want you to take this with you. I'm not saying that forgiveness is easy. It isn't easy. I think it's something supernatural, and you need to allow Jesus to forgive immediately through you because it is a principle, right? But you remember that, hey, God forgave the inexcusable in me, which is why I can forgive the inexcusable in you. Not because you deserve it or not because you were sorry, but because of what Christ has done in me. Now listen to this. Look at verses 34 and 35. And his master was angry, delivered him to the torturers until he should pay. Now look, so my heavenly Father also will do to you if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. I forget exactly who says it, but he says unforgiveness is like drinking poison, expecting someone else to die. It does you no good, so forgive immediately. And finally, the last one, always choose love. If you forgot 1 through 19, but if you remember number 20, you have the foundation that you need. How many marriages have I seen and stories that have taken place of abuse, of cheating, of betrayal? You call it, you name it, the craziest of stories. But somehow they were able to get through it. Why? Because they always chose love. If the foundation of your marriage has love, it does not matter what happens, you will be able to overcome. And so I'm going to end with this, and you're gonna probably know it when I start reading it, but please read this together. Remind yourself of this because it truly is the greatest gift. 1 Corinthians 13. This here is the definition of love, and this is what you must have in your marriage. It says this. I'm going to start in verse 4, but you should read it in its entirety. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Verse 8, love never fails. Love never fails. And my prayer is that love will never fail in your marriage. All right, guys. Remember, part 1, 1 through 10. Part 2, 11 through 20. Let's incorporate these advices in our marriage. Let's learn from others. Have a blessed night. I'll see you next time.